Okay, you guys, so you have taken your mud, your dirt, you've mixed it in with your white clay. You have a nice piece of clay that probably has some pretty cool marbling effects in it. So maybe some of you chose to mix it in completely so you have a nice tan color clay with some grog in it now. So we're going to take this type of clay now. This is kind of experimental, but I think it's going to be really cool. And we're going to turn this into a chameleon. So you have all created your shapes, your geometric shapes, and the reason why I have you do that is because in doing that, it sort of forces you to analyze all the different components that go into making a complete sculpture. So it might seem a little redundant or a little weird that we're actually starting off with a bunch of shapes that we're going to stick together. And in some cases, you might have to remake a shape if you're finding that it proportionally doesn't work with your sculpture. That's totally fine. So don't feel like just because you made a shape, you're committed to using it. So you might be, for instance, working and you create this body, and as you make the body and you're like thinking, now my head's too small, go ahead and smash it down and make a new head. That's totally fine. You're kind of just kind of sketching it out with those shapes. And then once you put them all together, you should have a well-proportioned, fun sculpture. So before you actually put it together, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the shapes, and then I'm going to give you a few little tips on how to put it together. Hopefully you've also found your prop that you're going to use to support the tail, which could be a branch, a rock, or stick, or anything natural that you found outside. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to pinch off a little bit of your clay to form the head. And the head essentially is a pyramid. It's a three-sided pyramid. One corner of the three-sided pyramid will be the bridge of the nose. You're going to use the back of your eraser to create some little dents, little sockets for the eyeballs, and you can use something like a nail file or a knife to open up the mouth. And then just pinch around the bottom lip and around the edges to sort of shape the expression. I've actually put a little bit of food coloring in some white clay to create these little green eyes. You can experiment with that if you want to. And I used a little bit of water and a little scoring and some pressure to secure the eyeballs in. I'm using the back of a paintbrush to make the pupils, but you can do whatever you want with the eyes to make it your own personal expression. I'm using the back of a nail file to weld, smooth, blend, and shape. And notice at the sort of at the edge of the bridge of the nose, there's a little bit of a crest. So you can pull some clay up, or you can also add a little bit of clay there. So now I'm taking the body and I'm sort of shaping it a little bit so that it will be compatible with the size of the head. Make sure where I'm going to join them it's pretty compacted, and then again I'm going to make a little bit of a socket with the back of a pencil or eraser. Score. You can use a pencil to score or a nail file or even a toothpick. I'm adding some water as my slip, and then I'm going to use quite a bit of pressure. I noticed it didn't quite fit, so I'm going to press that in a little bit and a little bit of pressure to make sure that it's really secure. And then the next step is to weld. So you can weld with your finger, a little bit of water, or you can use something like a popsicle stick or a nail file, but your fingers work just fine. I also think it's important to use a little reinforcement coil. You guys have had practice with this on previous projects. So it should just be very small, like maybe a size of a noodle. And you're going to it's a little too small to score, so you can just use a little bit of water, a little bit of pressure, and again you could use a popsicle stick, you could use your finger, or you can use a nail file whatever works. Any of those things will work. Then I took a look at my head and my body, and I thought it needed a little bit more clay up towards the spine. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that. And that's what you should do, is you should look at your head and your body, and then look at the reference picture that I gave you, or you could look at other reference pictures that you might find online, and try to pay attention to the shape of a body of a chameleon, and add clay wherever you think it's necessary. One of the nice things about working with this Crayola clay is we don't have to hollow anything out, so that's working to our advantage. That you can just add clay and not be concerned about how thick it is, or if we have trapped air or anything like that. So that's really nice. So the next thing is I'm going to try and create the tail. I think the best thing to do would be to work the spiral right into the tail, so you don't have to actually add it on later. And you want to adjust the tail to the body, and that might have, you might have to cut a few pieces off, or lengthen a piece, so sort of make it look proportioned. Again, you're making a little socket in the body and using a little water and a little bit of scoring and some pressure, and then go ahead and weld the body into the tail. You don't want to weld the tail into the body because the tail is thinner than the body, so you're welding the thicker part into the thinner part. And again, it's important to add a very small reinforcement coil around that joined area, so that when it starts to dry, it's not going to break. Use whatever tool you're comfortable with to weld and blend that in there. And you want to take the time to make it as seamless as you can, so that nobody can tell what was joined, that it all seems like it all belongs to one thing, so the body and the tail become one. The better you can do that, the more convincing your sculpture is going to be, and also the more it will hold together well. Okay, so that's essentially where you should be for your in progress #1 album picture. And you can see it's quite floppy, so I'm going to just let this firm up a little bit before I go on to the second part, where we will be adding feet, texture, and details to finish the piece and position it on your prop.